As Ethan's spacecraft drifted further into the vastness of space, he allowed himself to relax for the first time in weeks. The weight of Earth's contradictions slowly began to lift, replaced by the calm familiarity of the stars outside his window. He watched as pinpricks of light stretched into streaks, the ship's engines propelling him closer to Zorithus with each passing moment. For the first time since leaving, he felt a sense of clarity. Ethan thought about Mia often during the journey home. Her kindness, her optimism, and her unwavering belief in humanity's potential stayed with him like a lingering melody. She had been the one constant in his confusing experience on Earth, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. Though he had left without saying a proper goodbye, he knew she would understand. Mia wasn't someone who held grudges. She was someone who forgave, who believed in second chances. That was what made her special. He also thought about Ryan, whose skepticism had almost derailed his escape. At first, Ethan had seen Ryan as nothing more than an obstacle, a symbol of humanity's mistrust and aggression. But now, as he reflected on their encounter, he realized there was more to it. Ryan's suspicion wasn't born out of malice. It was a defense mechanism, a way of protecting himself from the unknown. In that sense, Ryan wasn't so different from Ethan, who had chosen to leave rather than face the uncertainty of staying. The memories of his classmates came flooding back too, the laughter in the hallways, the quiet moments in class, the arguments over grades and sports. Each interaction, no matter how small, had taught him something new about humanity. They were messy, unpredictable, and often contradictory, but they were also deeply alive, in ways that fascinated him. Even the dodgeball game, with all its aggression, had revealed something important. Humans thrived on connection, even if it was through competition. When Ethan finally arrived back on Zorithus, he stepped out of the spacecraft feeling lighter, as though he had left part of his burden behind. The air smelled crisp and clean, and the gentle hum of energy fields greeted him like an old friend. Dr. Illyra met him at the landing pad, her expression warm but curious. "Welcome home," she said simply. "Thank you," Ethan replied, managing a small smile. Home. It felt strange to call Zorithus that again after spending so much time among humans. Part of him still felt caught between worlds, neither fully alien nor fully human. In the days that followed, Ethan shared his full report with the Council. He spoke not just of humanity's flaws, but of their strengths, their creativity, their resilience, their capacity for growth. He emphasized that while Earth was far from perfect, dismissing them entirely would be a mistake. Humanity was still learning, still evolving. And perhaps in time, they might become ready for meaningful contact with other species. Back on Earth, Maya stood in her backyard one evening, staring up at the night sky. She didn't know where Ethan had gone, or if she would ever see him again, but she liked to imagine him out there somewhere, looking back at her. She remembered their conversations, the questions he had asked, and the way he had listened so intently. Ethan had opened her eyes to things she had taken for granted, the good and the bad. And she was grateful for that. Maya resolved to honor his memory by doing her part to make the world a better place. She joined Sophie's environmental group, volunteered at a local shelter, and encouraged others to think critically about their choices. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Someday, she hoped, humanity might prove itself worthy of trust, not just to aliens like Ethan, but to each other. As the stars twinkled above her, Mia whispered softly, "Goodbye, Ethan. Wherever you are, I hope you're safe." Then she turned and went inside, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Hope, she reminded herself, was the one thing humanity couldn't afford to lose, and she intended to hold on to it tightly. As the spacecraft ascended into the sky, Ethan sat in silence, staring out the window at the shrinking outline of Earth below. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, blue oceans, swirling clouds, and vast stretches of green and brown land. It was hard to believe that such beauty could harbor so much chaos. For a moment, he wondered if he had made the right choice. Leaving felt like abandoning something unfinished, but staying would have been unbearable. He reminded himself that he wasn't running away. He was preserving his own sanity. The ship's systems hummed softly around him, familiar sounds that grounded him in a way Earth never could. As Zorothus grew closer with each passing second, Ethan began to reflect on everything he had experienced. The kindness of Linda and Greg, the curiosity of his classmates, the passion of speakers at the assembly, the courage of veterans, and Mia. Always Mia. Her belief in humanity's potential had stayed with him, even now as he left her behind. She had shown him that hope existed, even in the darkest places. But alongside those memories were the shadows, the wars, the greed, the destruction. Humanity was a paradox, capable of both incredible good and devastating harm. Ethan realized he couldn't reconcile these contradictions. They were too vast, too complex. Perhaps that was why humans themselves struggled so often. They carried their flaws and virtues together, always striving for balance, but rarely achieving it. Hours passed, and eventually, the ship entered Zorathian airspace. The sight of his home planet filled Ethan with relief. Zorothus glowed softly in shades of silver and lavender, its surface dotted with crystalline structures and lush vegetation. Here, life moved at a slower pace, governed by reason and cooperation, rather than competition and conflict. It was safe, predictable, and comforting, but also distant from the raw emotions and unpredictability of Earth. When Ethan landed, he was greeted by Dr. Illyra and a small team of researchers eager to hear about his mission. They led him to a conference room where holographic displays flickered to life, ready to document his findings. For hours, Ethan spoke, sharing stories of human creativity, resilience, and compassion. He described their art, their science, their efforts to heal the planet they had damaged. But he also recounted the darker aspects, the wars, the inequality, the environmental destruction. They're not perfect, Ethan concluded, his voice tinged with both admiration and sadness. But they're trying. Some of them are working hard to make things better. I think that's worth respecting. Dr. Illyra nodded thoughtfully. Your observations will be invaluable, Ethan. Humanity is indeed unique, a blend of light and shadow. Whether we choose to engage with them further remains to be decided, but your report gives us much to consider. After the meeting ended, Ethan retreated to his quarters, exhausted but restless. He lay on his bed, staring up at the smooth ceiling, replaying moments from his time on Earth. He thought about Maya's optimism, Ryan's suspicion, the quiet determination of students organizing cleanups, and the solemn pride during the Veterans Day assembly. Each memory felt like a piece of a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Ethan knew he would never forget Earth, or Mia. She had taught him that understanding didn't mean agreeing or accepting. It meant seeing the whole picture, flaws and all. And while he doubted he would ever return, he hoped humanity might one day grow into the best version of itself. Until then, he carried their story with him, a reminder of what it meant to be imperfect yet hopeful. Far away on Earth, Maya stood outside her house, gazing up at the stars. She didn't know exactly where Ethan had gone, but she liked to imagine him looking back at her, remembering their conversations. Someday, she thought, maybe humans would prove themselves worthy of trust, not just to aliens like Ethan, but to each other. Until then, she resolved to keep believing in change, no matter how difficult it seemed. After all, hope was the one thing humanity couldn't afford to lose. Ethan moved quickly through the quiet streets, his footsteps barely making a sound on the damp pavement. The early morning air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew and freshly cut grass. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with the few people out walking their dogs or jogging along the sidewalks. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from the brisk pace, but from the knowledge that this was it, the moment he had been dreading and preparing for all at once. When he reached the park, he glanced around to ensure no one was watching. The area was deserted, save for a couple of squirrels darting between trees and a lone bird perched on a branch, chirping softly. Ethan exhaled slowly, allowing himself a brief moment of relief. He stepped off the path and into the shadows of a cluster of tall oak trees, where his spacecraft lay hidden beneath its advanced cloaking technology. To anyone else, it would look like nothing more than empty space, but Ethan could feel its presence, a subtle hum vibrating through the air. As he approached the ship, a sudden rustling behind him made him freeze. His breath caught in his throat as he turned sharply, scanning the area. At first, he saw nothing but the swaying branches and scattered leaves. Then, a figure emerged from the bushes. Ryan, the jock from school, stood there, his arms crossed, and a smug grin on his face. "What are you doing out here so early?" Ryan asked, his tone mocking. "Secret alien mission or something?" Ethan's stomach dropped. Had Ryan followed him? How much did he know? For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said evenly, taking a cautious step back toward the ship. Ryan laughed, though there was an edge to it. "Come on, Ethan, or whatever your real name is. You've been acting weird since you got here, sneaking around, asking strange questions, disappearing whenever it suits you." "I'm not stupid." Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing. If Ryan exposed him, everything would be ruined, not just his mission, but possibly relations between Earth and Zorithus. He couldn't let that happen. "Look," he said, trying to sound casual, "you're wrong about me. I'm just dealing with some personal stuff." "Personal stuff?" Ryan raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Yeah, right. Like I said, I'm not stupid. You're hiding something, and I want to know what it is." Before Ethan could respond, another voice broke through the tension. "Leave him alone, Ryan." It was Mia. She appeared at the edge of the clearing, her expression firm but worried. "He doesn't owe you anything." Ryan turned to glare at her. "Stay out of this, Mia. This has nothing to do with you." "It does now," she shot back, stepping closer. "If you have a problem with Ethan, take it up with me." For a moment, the two stared each other down, the air thick with hostility. Finally, Ryan rolled his eyes and took a step back. "Fine. Whatever. But if you think I'm buying his act, you're wrong." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. Ethan let out a shaky breath, his legs threatening to give way beneath him. He looked at Mia, gratitude and guilt swirling inside him. "Why did you come?" he asked quietly. "I followed you," she admitted. "I knew something was wrong. When I saw Ryan heading this way, I figured I should tag along." "What's going on, Ethan? Where are you going?" Ethan hesitated, torn between keeping his secret and trusting the one person who had truly understood him. Finally, he decided to tell her part of the truth. "I can't stay here anymore, Mia. Earth, it's too much. I need to leave." Her eyes widened in shock. "Leave? Why?" "Because of Ryan. Don't let him scare you off." "It's not just him," Ethan said, shaking his head. "It's everything. The history, the wars, the way humans hurt each other and the planet. I thought I could handle it, but I can't. I have to go." Mia frowned, tears welling up in her eyes. "So you're just giving up? Running away?" "No," Ethan replied firmly. "I'm not running. I'm protecting myself, and maybe protecting you too. Humans aren't ready for someone like me." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, realizing he had made up his mind. After a long pause, she nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but promise me one thing." "What's that?" Ethan asked. "Don't forget about us," she said softly. "About Earth. We're not perfect, but we're trying. Remember that." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding. "I will. Thank you, Mia." With that, he climbed aboard the spacecraft, the door sealing shut behind him. As the engines whirred to life and the ship began to ascend, Ethan watched Mia grow smaller and smaller below. Her face was etched with sadness, but also determination. He hoped she would keep believing in humanity, and that someday they might be ready to meet beings like him. Until then, he had seen enough to last a lifetime. The weeks passed quickly, and Ethan found himself growing more accustomed to life on Earth. He had started participating in small ways, joining the cleanup event organized by Sophie, helping Mia with a school project, and even attempting to play basketball during gym class. Each experience brought him closer to understanding humanity, yet it also deepened his internal conflict. The more he saw of their kindness, creativity, and resilience, the more their darker tendencies weighed on him. One Friday morning, the school held an assembly to commemorate Veterans Day. Students and teachers gathered in the auditorium, filling the space with quiet murmurs until the principal stepped onto the stage. Behind him, a large screen displayed images of soldiers in uniform, flags waving proudly, and memorials dedicated to those who had died in wars. Ethan sat near the back, feeling uneasy as the presentation began. A veteran named Mr. Thompson was invited to speak. He shared stories of bravery and sacrifice, describing how men and women had risked their lives for their country and their comrades. His voice carried both pride and sorrow, and many students listened intently, some wiping away tears. Ethan, however, felt torn. While he admired the courage these individuals had shown, he couldn't ignore the context, the violence, loss, and destruction that came with war. It seemed contradictory to honor acts of heroism while glossing over the horrors that made them necessary. When the national anthem played at the end of the assembly, Ethan stood silently with the others, his mind racing. The melody was beautiful, but the words felt heavy, burdened by history. As he looked around the room, he noticed different reactions. Some students sang along with passion, others stood quietly, and a few seemed indifferent. Humanity's complexity struck him once again. How could they hold such opposing emotions within themselves? That night, Ethan lay awake, replaying the events of the day in his mind. He thought about the veterans' stories, the pride on people's faces, and the lingering sadness beneath it all. For hours, he wrestled with his thoughts until finally, a decision formed in his mind. He couldn't stay on Earth any longer. The contradictions were too much, the weight of humanity's past pressing down on him like a stone. He needed to leave before he became desensitized to it, or worse, accepted it as normal. Early the next morning, before anyone else in the house was awake, Ethan began packing his belongings. He moved quietly, careful not to make noise as he folded clothes and gathered his disguise devices. Every item he touched reminded him of his time here. The meals shared with Linda and Greg, the laughter in the hallways at school, the walks home with Mia. A pang of guilt tugged at him, but he pushed it aside. Staying would only confuse him further. He had to go. Before closing his suitcase, Ethan pulled out a notebook and scribbled a short note to the Carters. "Thank you for everything," he wrote. "I'll never forget my time here." He left it on the desk, hoping it would soften the blow when they discovered he was gone. As dawn broke, Ethan slipped out of the house and headed toward a secluded park where his cloaked spacecraft waited. With each step, his resolve strengthened. Leaving Earth wasn't easy, but it was the right choice, for him, for his mission, and perhaps even for humanity itself. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself growing closer to Mia. She had a way of making him feel less alone, even when his thoughts were heavy with confusion. They started spending more time together after school, walking through the park or sitting by the lake. Ethan appreciated her patience. She never pushed him to talk unless he wanted to, and when he did open up, she listened without judgment. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench overlooking the water, Ethan decided to share more of what was troubling him. "Mia," he began hesitantly, "have you ever felt ashamed of your species?" Mia blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Ashamed? Like for things humans have done?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, for wars, pollution, all the harm people cause." Mia looked down at her hands, twisting them in her lap. After a moment, she sighed. Sometimes, yeah, it's hard not to feel that way when you read about history or see how we treat each other and the planet. But I try to focus on the good stuff too. The people who work to fix things, who care about others. But doesn't it bother you? Ethan pressed, knowing that humans are capable of so much harm. Of course it bothers me, Mia admitted. But I think it's part of being human. We're not perfect. We make mistakes, big ones. But we also have the ability to change, to grow. That's what gives me hope. Her words struck a chord deep within Ethan. He admired her optimism, even though it didn't fully erase his doubts. Do you really believe humanity can change? He asked softly. I have to, Maya replied with a small smile. Otherwise, what's the point? If we stop believing in change, then we give up. And giving up is the worst thing we can do. For the first time in days, Ethan felt a flicker of peace. Mia's perspective was refreshing, a reminder that not everyone accepted the world as it was. There were still people, like her, who fought for something better. He realized that her belief in humanity's potential wasn't naive. It was courageous. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan turned to Mia. Thank you, he said simply. For what? She asked, surprised. For helping me understand. Mia smiled warmly. You're welcome. Anytime. Later that week, Ethan attended a school assembly focused on environmental awareness. Speakers talked about climate change, recycling efforts, and ways students could help protect the planet. Ethan listened intently, impressed by how passionate some of the presenters were. One girl spoke about organizing a community garden, while another shared plans for a campus-wide cleanup event. Their enthusiasm reminded him of Zoroathus, where collective action was second nature. Afterward, Ethan approached the girl who had organized the cleanup. That was inspiring, he told her. How can I help? The girl, named Sophie, grinned. Really? That's awesome. We're meeting Saturday morning near the football field. Just bring gloves and a trash bag. Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced since arriving on Earth. Maybe Mia was right. Maybe change was possible, one small step at a time. That night, Ethan called his mentor, Dr. Illyra, using the secure connection. When her holographic image appeared, she looked pleased to see him. How are you holding up? She asked. I'm doing okay, Ethan replied. I've been learning a lot. Humans aren't perfect, but they're trying. Some of them, anyway. Illyra smiled faintly. That's encouraging to hear. Remember, Ethan, no society is flawless. What matters is the effort to improve. I know, Ethan said, and I think I'm starting to see why humanity fascinates so many others. They're flawed, but they're also resilient. Illyra nodded approvingly. Keep observing, Ethan. Your insights will be valuable. When the call ended, Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the stars. He still had questions, still felt uncertain about humanity's future. But for now, he chose to focus on the glimmers of hope he'd seen. The kindness of Mia, the determination of Sophie, and the quiet belief that change was possible. Perhaps understanding humanity required embracing both its light and its darkness. Late one evening, as Ethan sat alone in his room pretending to study, a soft hum filled the air. At first, he thought it was just the house settling or the wind outside, but then he recognized the sound. It was a secure transmission from Zoroathus. His heart raced as he pulled out his disguised tablet and activated the hidden interface. A holographic image of his mentor, Dr. Illyra, appeared before him, her face calm but serious. Ethan, she began, her voice gentle yet firm. I hope this message finds you well. How are you adjusting to Earth? It's challenging, Ethan admitted, glancing toward the door to make sure no one was listening. Humans are more complicated than I expected. Illyra nodded knowingly. That is why we sent you there. Humanity is unique, both in its potential and its dangers. But I must warn you, some planets have chosen not to engage with Earth because of its instability. Their capacity for destruction worries many. Ethan frowned. Do you think they're right? Should we avoid them completely? No, Elira replied quickly. Humanity also has great strengths: creativity, adaptability, and an unshakable will to survive. These qualities make them worth studying. However, you must remain cautious. Do not let their conflicts consume you. Her words echoed in Ethan's mind. He thought about the history lesson, the dodgeball game, and all the small moments of cruelty he had witnessed. Was he already being consumed by what he saw? What should I do? He asked quietly. Complete your mission as planned, Elira instructed. Observe, learn, and report back. But remember, your safety comes first. If you feel overwhelmed, you have permission to leave early. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Ethan staring at the blank screen. Her warning lingered in the air like a shadow. For a while, he sat motionless, replaying her advice in his head. She was right. Earth was unpredictable, and staying too long might put him at risk. Yet part of him resisted the idea of leaving. He hadn't come this far only to give up. The next day at school, Ethan found himself paying closer attention to everything around him. In art class, he watched as students painted vibrant landscapes and sculpted intricate figures. Their creativity amazed him. Even the simplest projects seemed to carry pieces of their personalities. During science class, he listened to a lecture about renewable energy and how humans were trying to heal the planet they had damaged. It gave him hope, however fleeting. But then there were moments that reminded him of humanity's darker side. At lunch, he overheard Ryan bragging about cheating on a test. When another student called him out, Ryan laughed it off, saying, "It's not like anyone got hurt." Ethan clenched his fists under the table, biting back a retort. How could someone justify dishonesty so easily? Mia noticed his tension and leaned closer. "You look upset. What's wrong?" Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "Nothing. Just thinking." Later, as they walked home together, Mia pressed him again. "Come on, Ethan. You can tell me. Are you homesick?" "Not exactly," he said after a pause. "I guess I'm just confused. Humans are amazing, but sometimes you scare me." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Scare you? Why?" "You build incredible things, but you destroy them too. You care deeply about some people, but ignore others. You dream of peace, but fight constantly." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "How do you live like that? How do you keep going when everything feels so messy?" Mia didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at the sidewalk, her expression thoughtful. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know if we always keep going. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we fall apart. But even when things seem hopeless, there's always someone who believes in making things better. Maybe that's enough." Her words stayed with Ethan long after they parted ways. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he realized Mia had given him something valuable, a new perspective. Humanity wasn't perfect, but neither was Zorithus. Every society had flaws. Every species struggled. The difference was the humans kept trying, even when the odds were against them. For now, Ethan decided to stay. He still had questions, doubts, and fears, but he also had hope. And maybe, just maybe, that was what made humanity worth understanding after all. The next few days passed in a blur for Ethan. Each morning, he woke up determined to focus on the positive aspects of humanity. But by the end of the day, his doubts always returned. At school, he tried to immerse himself in everyday life, joining conversations during lunch and listening carefully to what his classmates said. But the more he observed, the harder it became to ignore the contradictions. Mia continued to be friendly, often sitting with him at lunch or walking him to class. She noticed that something seemed off about him, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. "You've been quiet lately," she remarked one afternoon as they strolled across the courtyard. "Is everything okay?" Ethan hesitated, unsure of how much to share. He wanted to confide in someone, but revealing too much could put his mission, and possibly his safety, at risk. "It's just different here," he finally said, choosing his words carefully. "Back home, things are simpler." Mia tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" "Well," Ethan paused, searching for an example that wouldn't raise suspicion. "People seem to argue a lot. Over grades, over sports, even over little things like who gets to sit where." Mia laughed softly. "Yeah, humans can be pretty competitive, but not everyone's like that. You'll see." Ethan nodded, though her reassurance didn't fully ease his concerns. Later that day, he witnessed another side of human behavior that left him unsettled. During gym class, the students were divided into teams for a game of dodgeball. What started as playful competition quickly turned aggressive. One boy, Ryan, the same one who had mocked Ethan on his first day, shouted insults at his opponents, throwing the ball with unnecessary force. When a smaller student got hit and fell to the ground, no one stopped to check if he was okay. Instead, they cheered as Ryan celebrated his win. Ethan stood on the sidelines, watching silently. Back on Zorithus, games were designed to build teamwork and trust, not dominance. The idea of using play as a way to assert power baffled him. After class, he approached Mia, who was tying her shoelaces near the bleachers. "Why does everyone act like winning is so important?" he asked. Mia shrugged. "I guess some people think it makes them look better. Not everyone cares about being nice." "But isn't kindness more important?" Ethan pressed. "Isn't that what matters in the end?" Mia looked at him thoughtfully. "For some people, maybe. But others, I don't know. Maybe they're just scared of losing." That night, Ethan decided to talk to Linda about what he'd seen. He found her in the kitchen, washing dishes while humming a tune. "Can I ask you something?" he began cautiously. "Of course," Linda replied, drying her hands. "What's on your mind?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Do humans ever learn from their mistakes? Like when they hurt each other or damage the planet, do they try to fix it?" Linda smiled faintly, as if she had expected this question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "We have laws now to protect people and the environment. People march in protests, write books, make movies, all kinds of things to remind us to do better. But change takes time, and not everyone agrees on what's right." Her answer didn't satisfy Ethan. Time wasn't something he had in abundance, nor did he feel confident that humanity would change quickly enough. Still, he appreciated her honesty. As he walked back to his room, he realized that Linda's response reflected the complexity of Earth itself. Humans weren't purely good or evil. They were somewhere in between, constantly struggling to find balance. That struggle weighed heavily on Ethan. He admired their resilience and creativity, their ability to dream of a better future despite their flaws. But he also feared their capacity for harm. Could he truly understand them without becoming part of their chaos? And if he stayed much longer, would he lose sight of who he was? As he lay in bed that night, Ethan stared out the window at the stars twinkling faintly in the distance. Somewhere among those lights was Zorithus, safe and familiar. For the first time since arriving, he felt a pang of homesickness. Yet he knew he couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until he understood why humanity acted the way it did. That night, Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't quiet. The history lesson from earlier kept replaying in his head like a loop he couldn't escape. Wars, battles, conquests. It wasn't just the facts that bothered him, but the tone of it all. Mr. Peterson had talked about these events as if they were inevitable, almost natural. To Ethan, it felt wrong, like celebrating destruction instead of mourning it. He had seen conflict on Zorithus before, but it was always resolved through dialogue and compromise. Violence was rare, something reserved only for the most extreme cases. Humanity seemed so different. Unable to sleep, Ethan quietly slipped out of bed and opened his small suitcase. Inside was a sleek device disguised as a tablet. It connected him to Earth's vast network of information, allowing him to search freely without raising suspicion. He hesitated for a moment, then typed in the words *human history*. What he found made his stomach churn. The screen filled with images and articles about wars, slavery, colonization, and environmental disasters. Ethan scrolled through page after page, each one more shocking than the last. There were pictures of cities reduced to rubble, families torn apart, and entire species wiped out by human activity. One article described how millions of people had been forced into labor or killed simply because of their race or beliefs. Another detailed how humans were destroying their own planet, cutting down forests, polluting oceans, and heating the atmosphere until it became dangerous to live in. Ethan leaned back against the wall, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on him. How could such intelligent beings create such beauty, art, music, science, and yet inflict so much harm? He thought about Mia, who had been kind to him earlier that day, and wondered if she knew about these things. Did she feel ashamed of her species, or had she grown used to it, accepting it as normal? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Startled, Ethan quickly closed the tablet and slid it under his pillow. "Who is it?" he whispered. "It's Linda," came the reply. "Are you okay? I heard you moving around." Ethan hesitated, unsure of what to say. Finally, he opened the door a crack. Linda stood there in her robe, her expression concerned. "I'm fine," he said, forcing a smile. "Just adjusting." Linda nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. We're here for you." "Thank you," Ethan said softly, closing the door again. He waited until he heard her footsteps fade down the hallway before pulling out the tablet once more. This time, he searched for something positive, anything to balance out the darkness he had seen. He found stories of peace movements, scientific breakthroughs, and acts of kindness. Humans had fought to end slavery, protect wildlife, and explore space. They dreamed big and worked hard to make those dreams real. For a while, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe humanity wasn't beyond saving. But as he turned off the tablet and climbed back into bed, doubt crept in again. The good things he had read about seemed overshadowed by the bad. How could anyone trust a species capable of both incredible compassion and unimaginable cruelty? As he finally drifted off to sleep, one question lingered in his mind. Was humanity worth understanding? Or should he distance himself before it was too late? The next morning, Ethan woke up early, his mind buzzing with anticipation. He had spent most of the night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, and wondering what his first day at Lincoln High School would be like. The thought of meeting so many humans at once made him anxious, but he reminded himself that this was why he had come, to learn about them. Still, as he stood in front of the mirror adjusting his clothes, he couldn't help but feel out of place. His disguise was perfect, down to the smallest detail, but it didn't make him feel any less alien. Linda knocked on his door just as he finished getting ready. "Breakfast is ready," she called cheerfully. Downstairs, Greg was already seated at the table, sipping coffee while reading the newspaper. On the stove, a pan of scrambled eggs sizzled softly. Ethan hesitated before taking a seat, unsure of how to act or what to say. Human meals were always strange to him. They seemed so focused on flavor and texture, things he didn't fully understand. But when Linda placed a plate in front of him, he smiled politely and began eating. "You'll do great today," Linda said, her tone encouraging. "Everyone's really excited to meet you." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure he believed her. Humans were unpredictable, and he wasn't sure how they would react to him. Would they see through his disguise? Would they ask too many questions? He pushed those thoughts aside and focused on finishing his breakfast. When they arrived at the school, Ethan felt overwhelmed by the noise and activity. Students filled the hallways, laughing, shouting, and slamming lockers shut. Some carried books, others held cups of coffee or snacks. It was all so chaotic compared to the quiet orderliness of Zorathian society. A tall man with curly hair greeted them at the entrance. "You must be Ethan," he said, shaking Ethan's hand firmly. "I'm Mr. Harris, the principal. Welcome to Lincoln High." "Thank you," Ethan replied, trying to sound confident. Mr. Harris led him to the main office, where a girl around his age waited. She had dark hair tied back in a ponytail and wore a friendly smile. "This is Mia," Mr. Harris explained. "She'll show you around and help you get settled." Mia waved awkwardly. "Hi, Ethan. Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too," Ethan said, feeling a flicker of relief. At least one person seemed approachable. As they walked through the halls, Mia pointed out classrooms, the cafeteria, and the gym. She talked quickly, telling him about the school's sports teams, clubs, and upcoming events. Ethan listened intently, nodding whenever she paused for a response. He noticed how effortlessly she moved through the crowd, greeting friends and dodging slower walkers. To him, it felt like navigating a maze. Their first stop was history class, taught by Mr. Peterson. The room was already filled with students when they entered. Ethan slid into an empty seat near the middle, hoping not to draw attention to himself. But as soon as the bell rang, Mr. Peterson introduced him to the class. "We have a new student joining us today," the teacher announced, gesturing toward Ethan. "He's here from, well, somewhere far away. Let's give him a warm welcome." A few students clapped half-heartedly, while others whispered to each other. One boy in particular caught Ethan's eye, a muscular guy with short brown hair who smirked openly. "What kind of name is Ethan?" he muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Laughter rippled through the room. Ethan felt his face grow hot, but he forced himself to stay calm. This wasn't the first time someone had doubted him, and it wouldn't be the last. Mr. Peterson quickly changed the subject, launching into a lecture about ancient civilizations. For a moment, Ethan forgot his embarrassment and listened closely. History fascinated him. It was like piecing together a puzzle. But then Mr. Peterson began discussing wars fought over land and power. Ethan's interest turned to unease as the teacher described battles and conquests, showing maps marked with lines of conflict. He tried to focus on the facts, but something about the lesson unsettled him. By the end of class, he realized he hadn't taken any notes. Instead, he sat there silently, wondering if humanity's past was a reflection of its present or its future. Ethan stood at the edge of the bustling airport terminal, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Around him, travelers hurried past, dragging suitcases and chatting loudly into their phones. The air smelled faintly of coffee and jet fuel, a strange but oddly comforting combination. For Ethan, this was more than just another stop on a journey. It was the beginning of an adventure he had dreamed about for years. He wasn't exactly like the other passengers, though no one could tell by looking at him. Beneath his carefully crafted human appearance, he was an alien from the distant planet Zorathis. The assignment had come as both an honor and a challenge. As part of an interstellar exchange program, Ethan had been chosen to spend 6 months studying Earth's culture firsthand. His mission was simple: observe, learn, and report back to his people. But nothing in his training had prepared him for the sheer complexity of humanity, or the overwhelming chaos of their airports. Still, Ethan reminded himself why he was here. Earth fascinated him. Its people were known across the galaxy for their creativity, resilience, and unpredictability. They were builders and dreamers, yet they also carried a dark side that intrigued and worried him. A voice broke through his thoughts. "Ethan, is that you?" A woman approached, smiling warmly. She had short blonde hair and wore a bright yellow sweater that seemed to glow against the dull gray walls of the terminal. Beside her stood a man with glasses and a kind expression, holding up a sign that read *welcome, Ethan *. "Yes, that's me," Ethan replied, forcing a smile. His voice sounded calm, though inside he felt anything but. He had practiced speaking English for months, but hearing it spoken so quickly still made his head spin. "I'm Linda, and this is my husband, Greg," the woman said, extending her hand. Ethan hesitated for a split second before shaking it. Human customs were tricky, but he didn't want to seem rude. "We're so excited to have you stay with us. How was your flight?" "It was fine," Ethan said, choosing his words carefully. In truth, the cramped seat and constant announcements had left him feeling drained. But he didn't want to complain, not when these two strangers were going out of their way to make him feel welcome. The ride home was filled with small talk. Linda asked questions about his trip, while Greg pointed out landmarks along the highway. Ethan nodded and smiled, doing his best to keep up with the conversation. Occasionally, he glanced out the window, marveling at the world outside. Everything looked so different from space. Trees swaying in the breeze, cars zipping by, houses lined up neatly in rows. It all felt impossibly alive. When they arrived at the Carter's house, Ethan stepped inside and took a deep breath. The smell of fresh bread wafted from the kitchen, mixing with the faint scent of flowers from a vase on the dining table. Photos of smiling faces covered the walls, and a soft rug cushioned his feet. It was cozy, almost too much so. Back on Zorithus, homes were sleek and minimalist, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. This place felt warm. Linda showed him to his room, which she had decorated especially for his arrival. There was a desk for studying, a bed with clean sheets, and even a small shelf stocked with books. "If there's anything else you need, just let us know," she said, patting his shoulder. "We're really glad you're here." "Thank you," Ethan said softly. And for the first time since landing, he meant it. Despite his nerves, there was something comforting about the Carter's kindness. Maybe living among humans wouldn't be as difficult as he feared. But as he unpacked his bag and set up his disguised communication device, Ethan couldn't shake the thought that this mission would change him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Little did he know, the real challenges were only beginning.